What's happening?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Asma, if you can just mute along.
Sorry?
You can mute yourself in the meantime. Okay. Na'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. We seek refuge in Allah, the accursed shaitan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah, most merciful, especially merciful. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana. Glory be to you, O Allah. There is no knowledge for us except that which you teach us. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una. O Allah, teach us that which will be beneficial for us. وَزِدْنَا عِلْمًا, and increase us in knowledge. وَرُزُقْنَا فَهْمًا, and grant us understanding. يَا مُقَلِّبَ الْقُلُوبِ, O change of hearts. ثَبِّتْ قُلُوبَنَا عَلَى دِينِكَ, keep our hearts firm on your deen. اللهم اجعل أعمالنا خالصة لوجهك. O Allah, grant our actions to be done sincerely for your sake. وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِيهَا حَظًّا لِغَيْرِكَ, and let not be in them a portion for other than you. Ameen. Ameen. On behalf of Muslims Connected, I welcome you to this evening's webinar, which is going to be an interesting discussion between Fazila Karim and Sumaya Khan. So I'm going to give you just a very brief bio about the two of them. So Fazila Karim is a chartered accountant by profession. She is a wife and a mother and an author, mashallah. And she self-published her first book called Her Peace at War, and she can give us information later on how we can get hold of a copy of the book. And the book is loosely based on real events and navigates the complex tapestry of cultural norms and injustices accepted, and talks about her journey in owning the choices one makes. And then we have Sumaya Khan with us, who is a practicing clinical psychologist for the past 13 years. She runs a private practice, and she can tell us a little bit more about herself. And yeah, she's passionate about breaking down the stigma existing around mental health issues, which is the topic of tonight's webinar. So I am going to hand over to her.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Sumaya Khan, and sorry about all the movement. Fazila and I are actually in the same space. We were hoping to have like this very easy discussion, sort of opposite one another in my dining room, but unfortunately being in the same space with two devices, it was causing quite a bad echo. So I had to move into my office space. So now I'll just be viewing her on the computer like the rest of you. And yeah, so welcome to the discussion. Shukran so much for all of you for joining. It just shows the importance of the topic that we're going to discuss by having so many of you present. We really want this to just be quite a easy, casual sort of conversation around the topic of the stigma of mental health in the Muslim community, or mental illness in the Muslim community. And the reason I suggested to Fazila that we do this together is because the book that she's written is based within a Muslim community here in Cape Town, and it touches on a lot of the topics of mental health, mental illness within our Muslim communities, a lot of the stigmas that exist within our Muslim community. So it felt like a nice way to also just make what we're talking about more tangible and more relatable, because we're not just talking randomly about these topics, but about sort of actual experiences and things that are seen by me in my practice on a day-to-day basis. And it's the environment that Fazila and I have both, and many of you have grown up in, and what we've experienced in our own lives. So Fazila, I'd like to invite you to maybe just give us a brief synopsis of your book or the plot, and maybe even touch on some of the mental health themes that come up in your book as well.
Thank you so much, Sumaya. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to be a bit virtually there. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Really happy to be here, and I feel really honored that you have allowed me to share this platform with you, Sumaya. I do share that same passion for purpose when it comes to this specific topic and talking through these things, and also being those change makers to try and start these conversations, especially within our communities. And then when it comes to the book, so the story is actually it's actually my journey and my story, and a way for me to be able to, I think, work through some of my issues from my own past. And so what I had grown up in was obviously the 90s. And during the 90s, there wasn't really this talk about mental health or anything like that. And a lot of the traumas that I had faced didn't have a handle, it didn't have a platform. And especially within the community, with my parents, with my family. So it was a compounding effect of experiencing trauma, but then also having no way to work through anything, and to have your community sort of not also be equipped to deal with that, and then further compound that feeling of things not being okay. And so the book story revolves around a girl who grows up in Cape Town, and she has this very intense relationship with her mom. It's a very codependent relationship, purely because the mom experiences various types of abuse from her husband. So this girl's father, the girl's name is Alia. And then there's also so that sort of leads to the theme of generational trauma within the book, and then the depression of the mother that then builds anxiety within the daughter. And then then there's also the suppression of everything that actually happens within the family that surrounds the mother, that's meant to support or be the support for this person. And then instead of being that crutch for her to try and deal with things, she's kind of told to keep quiet about it and carry on, and like focus on more tick box type of things. Just make it through the day and make it through the month, and make sure you people have money, that you're not asking anybody else for help, because that's going to reflect badly on the family, that kind of thing. So that's in a nutshell. It's not in a nutshell, actually, the book. That's a couple of specific aspects of it that speak to mental health. Sorry, I'm not doing a really good job of covering the full story, but anyway.
No, I mean, shukran for that. I think it does definitely cover what we're wanting to focus on in terms of just the mental health aspects of it. Because yes, I mean, the book, focuses on the relationship of three friends and how they work their way through all of these challenges. And I think that, and that's so important. Just obviously, that's also one of the themes in terms of the support of friends and those relationships and how important they are. And just by the way, everyone, this is the book, A Peace at War. We will tell you guys where you can get a copy if you want. I see Zakira says I'm sounding very faint, so I'm gonna just try and increase my volume here. Does that sound a bit better? Please let me know. I've just increased the volume. Nobody's saying anything. Oh, okay. Thank you, Aisha. Yes, okay, so I'm sounding better. Just to say, for one, yes, thank you for letting us know if there's any issues. And if there are any questions that come up as we're talking, please also feel free to just put it in the chat. And so not the Q&A, put it in the chat, because we'd like, we want to do this quite naturally and organically. And so if there's certain things that we're talking about that you guys would want us to elaborate on or whatever, then just ask in the moment, and we'll try to respond. Sorry, we'll try to respond to it in the moment. Okay, so yeah, I was just saying that. So these are the very important and specific challenges that I think we find, I mean, not just in the Muslim community, these are issues that exist in all communities. I think, like, when you look at a lot of the Orthodox communities, there's a lot of stigma that exists around mental health. And I think that that's an important thing to mention, because I think a lot of the times within our communities, there's always this thing around, oh, you know, Muslim people, like, they don't understand mental health, and there's all the stigma. But I really think when we talk about generational trauma, that's part of it on a bigger scale, that this sort of exists within a lot of Orthodox communities, within a lot of people of color communities, to be honest, as well, both. And yeah, and so, you know, that question of where does the stigma arise from? And I think that topic of generational trauma is quite a significant one, because that is really the root of where everything comes from, is the generational trauma. It's what feeds a lot of the issues that exist within our communities. Fazila, was there anything else you wanted to add?
I was actually thinking, did we ever discuss, and I think we did during one of our discussions, it was about the specifically the stigma that's attached to everything, and where does that come from? And that's possibly our relationship as a community with shame. And so shame is like immediately that feeling, that situation, that experience that is shut down, that is dismissed, that is withdrawn from any conversation. And because we are not comfortable with it, it's not easy for the child to come forward with, this is the thing that's bothering me. It's like simple things of when you are shutting someone down and you think nothing of it and you're dismissing them, and it's something so big to them, you effectively dismissing that thing that's going to happen, or that long term is going to be this big thing that's affecting someone, and then no conversation will be had and you won't be able to work through the thing. And it's about dealing with shame as an emotion, as a community. So first as an individual, and then also it's different for a male and a female. I think it's a lot easier for a female to actually identify it, to label it, to talk about it. Even for a male, it's probably a lot more difficult. I don't know, I'm not a male, but I mean, we don't see spaces where that gets spoken about very freely, like where a man is allowed to be vulnerable. And because that's not a given thing, that's not a common thing, then you become sort of, you're an outlier if you're going to broach the subject, so you rather kind of keep quiet. And so that's how you build that stigma, that's how it grows, that's how it continues to fester within the community. I wanted to say that on your part about the stigma, and then also on the generational trauma. I think I have told you this, that concept existed for me for years, where I was like, yeah, that's out there in the world, that never happened to me, it's not me and whatever. And then last year when I decided, okay, I want to actually reflect on things, because I always looked at my life as, okay, there's after things started to go okay for me in my 20s, and then pre-20s I just blocked everything out. And then last year I decided I want to revisit everything, because there might be something there that I need to work through. Maybe I have a couple of issues that are coming up right now for me as a person in my day-to-day life. I'm getting angry when I'm pulling out the car and the neighbors behind me and I'm just going crazy. So maybe it's not that thing that's the trigger point, and maybe it's something else. So anyway, writing the book actually gave me that outlet, and that is where I realized there's a big chunk of generational trauma that I've actually been carrying with me for so long. And a lot of it, I had to separate what was the pain of my mother versus the pain of me as a child. And then some of it was even working through the guilt of feeling like acknowledging the fact that I had pain as a child, to have carried the pain of my mother. And that's okay, but you don't in that moment or in those years give yourself that break. You just kind of carry on, try and patch things through and carry on with life. So yeah, that's definitely a big
100%.
topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you brought the topic of shame up. Yeah, because that's definitely something that I wanted to speak about on too, because I think that that's what a lot of, when you say, you know, where does that stigma stem from and why do people not talk about it, that guilt and shame is a huge factor. You know, we're really, really guilted into not talking about it. It's normalized that you don't talk about it. You're even threatened to not talk about what's happening within the home, especially if it's things like physical abuse or emotional abuse that's happening within the home. It's not, you know, you're not meant to talk about it outside of the home. And that is, you know, we talk about generational trauma, and I think it's important to maybe just define that for some people, because you know, we're using it as if it's a term that everybody is just familiar with, but obviously I'm sure there are people who don't fully understand it. But it's basically trauma being transferred from one generation to the next through direct experience of like witnessing violence or living in an environment where violence is a constant threat. And it kind of just creates this narrative in our minds of how we are meant to be in the world. And so if we've had a mother who was physically, mentally, emotionally abused throughout her marriage, as a girl child, that's teaching us that that's normal. That's what a relationship between a man and a woman is supposed to look like. And so if we get into a relationship with a man who does the same thing to us, then we see that as normal and we don't see that as a problem. So then our children will be witnessing the same cycle, and then they will continue the same pattern again. So when we talk about what do we do about this and how do we address this, it's about breaking that cycle. It's about somewhere along the line, someone being able to see this and say, no, this is not right. This is not okay. And I don't want my life to look like that. And I think that what Fazila expressed about her own experiences is very important, because a lot of the time, these repressed experiences, these repressed traumas, and when I use the word trauma, I think it's also important to just explain that, because a lot of people, you know, when you use the word trauma, they think we're talking about something like unbelievably atrocious that happens to you. But trauma can come in many different forms, whether it's, you know, witnessing your parent being abused, whether it's yourself getting abused, or whether it's just some sort of like neglect or bullying or just like, yeah, your needs not being met, especially as a child. A child's experience of trauma is very different to what an adult may experience as trauma. And the smallest thing where a child's needs, their primary needs, are not being met because their parent is not available enough or present enough to give that to them because of their own stresses or depression or anxiety that they're experiencing, that child experiences neglect. And that is a trauma for that child. And then the way in which they grow up, that ability to trust, that ability to allow people in and build healthy relationships, it suffers. And it's a really, really difficult thing to do. And I'm seeing Fazila smiling and nodding, so I'm feeling like she really relates to what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is.
Especially the trusting part, like as you're talking about it, and when I go back to the things that had happened to me in the past, and like the fact that your father is supposed to be your caregiver, one of your primary caregivers, and that's supposed to be your structure for safety, for psychological safety in your foundation phase of life. And when that was missing from my life for over 20 years, like, how am I even able to connect and trust with people? And the truth is, the truth is, in the business space, it really works for me because I'm always the most I don't trust anything, anyone. And so it really works there. And it's about knowing which coping mechanisms from all of those things that have happened that serve me well now in maybe a corporate space, but maybe not so much in a social space. So definitely I feel that, especially with the trust factor. I always wondered about it, especially in my early 20s. I mean, my husband will be a testament to the fact that he could never understand my trust issues. But but now I have an explanation, so everything's justified. Now I'm joking. But it really does help me identify, because a lot of the time, especially in my early 20s, I questioned myself and I was like, there's something deeply wrong with me. There's something deeply unsettling, and I don't understand because I passed this course and I have this job and all of these. So what is actually wrong with me that I can't trust people? And it's only if you let you, and at that point I wasn't reflecting on anything of the past. And it's only when you allow yourself to go back there to like really think about, how did I actually grow up and what am I blocking out here really? That's when you let it all in, and that's when you identify what those issues were that are setting you up for the person that you are right now, and what you should be doing more of, doing less of, because some of those things can actually be your weaknesses or your bad habits or your crutches that you're using now that you really shouldn't be using. But yeah, that's why I was nodding and smiling.
Yeah. No, but I mean, you laughed and you said, oh, just joking, when you said, now I have an excuse for it, or like whatever. But that's the reality, and that's the truth. And that's why we actually, want to encourage people to seek therapy and seek help and things like that, because that realization of where all this anger comes from, that inability to trust, that inability to build relationships, like why? And the thing is, we look at it and we think we are not worthy enough. People don't want to be my friend because I'm not good enough. I don't have anything to offer them. That is what happens, is that we internalize it. These external things that happen to us, we internalize it. And we think that, we think that this is how the world sees us. My father never saw me as good enough, so he didn't stick around. So then, and the world, it seems like he was right, because everyone doesn't want to be friends with me. Nobody, but really it's the way what you're projecting out into the world, because you don't believe that you're worthy enough because of what you experienced from your own childhood and that trauma of your own, so it's actually so significant that you said that, because when we finally have that realization that, oh wow, okay, this is where it was stemming from, this is not me, it's not me who's like not a good person or doesn't have anything to offer, but there's an explanation for why I can't trust people, why I can't open up, why I'm like the very hardcore person within my work environment and things like that, and can be so clinical and cut off and like whatever. There's actually an explanation for that. It's like a whole new world opens up, and it's like you were wearing blinkers your whole life, and now suddenly you can see everything around you. And that's where that's why the book was created, because you had these amazing realizations. And Zakira, I see your question and I'm going to answer it now. And and so it opens everything up. So Zakira just commented, does everything come from your childhood? And that's not what I'm saying. We're not saying that it's all related to childhood, and that because depression, anxiety, trauma, it's all, it can be environmental, so it can or it can be situational. So what, like mental health issues, a lot of mental health issues are similar to physical health issues, in the sense, like I'm sure most of you have heard the thing that we all have cancer cells within us, but it takes something to trigger that, to actually cause the cancer to like mutate within our bodies. Similarly, with like depression and anxiety and things like that, because these are natural emotions. You know, we all feel sad sometimes. We all feel anxious in certain situations. We all, you know, have things that we are afraid of, and you know, situations that we don't feel as comfortable in and things like that. But when you talk about depression and anxiety, that's like clinical depression and anxiety, it's a whole other ball game. You know, it's not being able to function on a day-to-day basis, being completely debilitated by your depression, your anxiety, your trauma, all of these things. So no, these do not all stem from your childhood. It can be situational. It can be because of like immense grief. It can be of a specific trauma that you experience now as an adult. It can be from like some stress, like day-to-day stress that you're experiencing. Yeah, so there's many reasons. The reason we're focusing a lot on this is because if we look at our communities as a whole and from what we've experienced as, you know, generationally, even though I know a lot of us come from all over the world, it's not just a South African-based audience that we have tonight. I think that as communities of color, we've all, our ancestors have experienced some form of trauma, whether it's torture, slavery, hardships, apartheid, indentured labor, loss of your culture, loss of your homeland because they'd have to move for whatever reasons of warfare or whatever was going on. And then losing that sense of belonging, discrimination, prejudice. You know, as people of color, this is something that we experience a lot. And also, not to say that all Muslim people are people of color. Sorry, just a little disclaimer there. But I think that, you know, when you look at generational trauma, a lot of it comes from those, because if you're a person of color, this is what you've experienced, or this is what your ancestors have experienced, and then this is how it speaks to your life as it continues. I see there was another. Azila, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say on that, on the childhood stuff. Okay, wait.
On the question about the childhood, if it all comes from, for me, majority of it came from childhood. There wasn't a lot of junk that happened after I turned 25, although there was some. But I mean,
well,
I
yeah,
really made an effort to sit down, and I still do, like, all the time. Like, a lot of people just fill their days in their lives with so many things to do. And like weekends, oh, we need to go to the next training place on Instagram so that we can say that we've been there and blah, blah, blah. And that's not what it's about for me or my husband. And we will literally just sit for hours and think and talk and like really take one little snatch of a memory that maybe happened 5 minutes, 20 years ago, and dissect that thing from all angles. And I feel like there's so much growth we get from that. There's so much perspective that we get from it by discussing it with one another like that. And I think like therapy sometimes is also a very similar thing. And for me, it's when anytime I do go back, then I do realize something new. And it's because I shut it down for so long. That's why I'm going back to look at those things. But a lot of it for me personally has stemmed from the childhood. And that's why it was important for me in the book also to write it from the perspective of like a 14-year-old girl and what she had experienced when she was 9 and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I wanted to cover on that question.
Brilliant, thank you. And that's exactly it. I mean, yes, our focus tonight is a lot on that because we're talking about the themes of the book and how it relates. So thank you for that. And Fatima Daniels, you commented, or you asked, does your mental health affect your physical health? In a lot of cases, yes. And I think that within our communities as well, you actually find that to be very significant because of the way out. So when we talk about the stigmas, one of the things that we are often told is around, not speaking about what happens, not talking about your traumas. So even like things around like sexual abuse, and the person is silenced when they experience sexual abuse, or they don't even feel safe enough to talk about it because they already know that they're not going to be supported or believed because of who the perpetrator is. So there's a lot of stuff around that doesn't allow a person to speak. And what you find is that as adults, if we were never taught how to express your emotions, how to emotionally regulate in a healthy way, you end up with a lot of repressed feelings. And if you're not externalizing it, then you're going to internalize it and you're going to feel it in your body. So whether it's through consistent stomach pain, irritable bowel syndrome is a huge thing. There is a huge connection between your gut health and your mental health. There's so much information out there about that. So absolutely. Body pains. There's a form of therapy called body stress release that is actually amazing. I'm just like putting that out there as well. But what they look at is how we carry stress in our bodies, and to release that stress from our muscles and in our bodies. And so a lot of people who experience like back pain, shoulder pain, chronic pain, and no doctors can figure out where it's coming from. A lot of it is because of emotional stress, of emotional strain, whether that's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's just emotional stress and things on your day-to-day basis that you're not talking about. Zakir commented, I'm guessing everybody's seeing the comments because it's in the chat. I'm not going to mention all of them. And then Anissa said, so are you trapped in the trauma that transcends generations? Yes, you can. That's exactly what we're talking about, is that unless you recognize that something is wrong and I don't want to be living in this cycle anymore. I'm not a happy person. I'm not fulfilled. I don't like how I am treating my children because this reminds me of how I was treated as a child, and I don't want my children to feel the way I feel. When you're able to recognize that, or when you just recognize that something isn't right, like Fazila was saying, getting so angry, reversing out your driveway, and people not giving you way, that repressed anger is a huge sign of something else that's going on. Anger is always our first port of call because it's an easy emotion. It's an emotion that makes you feel strong. It makes you feel, whereas sadness, crying, that makes you feel vulnerable. Nobody wants to show their vulnerability, especially when you haven't been taught how to regulate your emotions. But anger makes you feel like you're in control. And it's so not true. It's such a false perception of being in control. And so that's why we get trapped in those traumas. But when you recognize it and you say, I need to get help, that's the biggest gift you can give yourself. And like Fazila was saying, she and her husband sit and talk about some of their past experiences. So, and that's beautiful. That's so brilliant that she has a relationship, a partnership where she can do that. Not all relationships are like that. Not all partners have the EQ where they're able to have those sort of conversations. But support systems are very important. So whether that's a sibling, whether that's a group of girlfriends or guy friends, whether, you find your people or your person, and where you're able to have those conversations. You don't always have to be in therapy because it also depends on the extremity of what your trauma is and what your struggle is. But when you realize it and you're able to go break that cycle, reach out and get the support, that makes all the difference. Fadia asks, how do you forgive the person who caused you trauma and let it, and I'm assuming you mean let it go. That's a hard one. And that's really something that you can learn to do within a therapeutic experience. I have a lot of exercises that I do with clients where it may even be people who've passed on. They're not even alive anymore. So, it's like, how do I let go? How do I forgive this person when they're not even here anymore? So there's a lot of exercises, therapeutic exercises that you can do where it teaches you to be able to forgive yourself, forgive the other person, and let it go, and then move forward in a very healthy way. I just see there's a few people who put comments in the Q&A, so I'm just going here quickly.
Do you think it's necessary to, like, where does the concept of forgiveness come from? And like, do you really need to forgive that person who caused you the trauma? And I know our religion also teaches us to be in that mindset of forgiveness and all of that. And I get that. And it only depends on your heart and whether the state of your heart is actually at peace already. And you can't get there without doing the work that is needed in order to get there. And when you are considering the forgiveness of another, it's actually more you considering your own context within that trauma environment and really understanding yourself and not giving that person so much power any longer. And I think once you work through that and once you take away what you are assigning actually in your head now as power to that person, you take that away from them. And then you are actually in a much better space to have that peace to be able to then forgive. I just wanted to go back to whether it is necessary or not to actually go through.
Yeah, thanks for that, Fazia. I think that forgiveness is a relative thing, and I think that it is different for everyone. Some people genuinely feel like they need to do that. Like with some patients that I see, they need to physically do the act of asking for forgiveness. And with some of them, it's not a physical act, it's a figurative act of asking for forgiveness, where they do it like for themselves, whether it's like writing a letter to the person, and then we do like a metamorphosis of that and letting it go. And for others, exactly like you said, processing your own stuff and coming to terms with your own stuff, you're able to just forgive, and you don't need to communicate with the other person, whether it's literally or figuratively. You don't need to do it. So I really think it's different for each person. So yeah, but I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not always necessary to have to physically forgive the other person. And when you brought up the point of, like, in Islam we're taught that you must forgive and things like that, and yes, that's very, like, that's what Islam teaches us. And I think especially when it's your family, because your family members, it's always spoken about how you're not supposed to have bad blood between family members and things. So it's about how you make peace with that, so making peace with it is a form of forgiveness.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to physically go to the person and be like, I forgive you, or do you, and all the dua that you make, because it's between that, it's between you and Allah, how you deal with that. It doesn't necessarily have to, like, physically be between you and that person. It's just about finding that peace. And if you're at peace with it and you trust in your relationship with Allah, that's what matters at the end of the day. Someone asked a question, because this ties into it, that's why I'm just floating on, but someone asked the question about the notion of mental health problems is often related to spirituality or lack of it, or one's beliefs in the will of Allah. And I can't tell you how unbelievably untrue this is. There are so many scholars out there who talk about the fact that Islamic scholars created the first psychiatric hospital that ever existed. And that just shows that from an Islamic perspective, how important mental health was. There are chapters in the Quran and in Hadith about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his own depression that he experienced, from his grief and the loss of his beloved family members. And we're given guidance in the Quran. There are verses where grief, depression, and anxiety are all suggested, and where seeking help is advised. Yes, Allah is there for us, but he's also put people like us, psychologists, psychiatrists on this earth, social workers, on this earth to help you, because it's also about that whole idea about community and helping each other, and realizing that, you know, as human beings, we are not an island. We need support. We need the assistance of others. And it's not a lack of spirituality. Our Prophet ﷺ, who has suffered with depression, and where there's an entire surah that was revealed to soothe him during his time of depression. If those of you who want to know, it's Surah Duha, chapter 93. That surah was revealed to soothe Prophet ﷺ when he was experiencing his depression. There's many other verses in the Quran where they talk about depression. They talk about sadness or struggle or difficulty and finding relief. So it is all there, and if you research it, you'll definitely find those. Okay, sure. There's a lot of comments coming in, so I'm gonna try my best. This is really great though, guys, because it helps with our conversation. Okay, what is the best type of help to get to navigate anxiety, OCD, and depression? The first port of call would be a psychologist, and then they would be able to assess and then refer you on if you needed to see like a psychiatrist, or whether, you know, you would just continue with therapy. It all depends on the level of what you're experiencing. Okay, and then someone said, being on antidepressants for 3 years now, I've done counseling. The thing I feel that helps the most is my Salah Quran zikr, but it's up and down, feel great for days, and all of a sudden it's back. I mean, I think that's also something that's really important. When you're diagnosed with depression and anxiety or any mental health illness, it's not something that will necessarily just go away. If it's a situational depression or anxiety, yes, then, you know, through therapy, through learning some coping mechanisms and stuff, you can overcome it, because it's a situational thing. So you move past it, and then, you know, things get better, situation changes, and so you leave the depression behind and you move forward. But when you have a clinical depression or clinical anxiety, that is there for life. You will learn coping mechanisms, the medication will help, everything that you use, whether it's through your duas, your zikr, all of those things are going to be helpful to you. But at times of increased stress, it's going to become harder. And then obviously at times where there's decreased stress, or you feel like you're coping better, or you have more support around you, you're going to feel more capable and more able to cope. Sure, there's a lot of questions here. Fazila, I don't know if there's anything else specifically that you wanted to speak about with regards to some of the themes. I mean, or even like with the questions that are coming up, if there's anything specific.
Yeah, I wanted to understand this one. When dealing with trauma, like an unexpected death of a parent, we often hear they didn't have to suffer and that it's been put out. It comes across as if one's iman is not strong enough. There is a feeling of being grateful, but also a feeling of grief. And this does not seem to be understood a year after the fact. Understood by who? That's what, or understood by everyone else, that you're still struggling with the conflict of dealing with the grief, or that I just didn't understand that statement too well. Maybe I required a bit more. Yeah, by the rest of the family.
Okay.
I mean, a year is still fresh,
You know,
also. That's very soon.
Very. That's what I was gonna say as well. Yeah. You know, people think that grief is like there's stages, where you just go through like grieving and then, you get over it. That's not true. Grief can be cyclical, different time of the year, different, other things that are going on. It'll bring back memories, something you see, or being in a specific place, or being around certain people. It hits you as if it just happened yesterday. And this can be 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Grief never completely leaves you. And it's something that is different. No two people experience grief the same. You can have similarities, but no two people experience it the same. It's really different for everyone. So, but there is something, a diagnosis that is called complicated grief. Sometimes if you are really, and it's not about your iman, this has nothing to do with your iman. When we have such a strong connection with people and you've lost them, and especially if it's an unexpected way, it's even harder to come to terms with it. And grief, Salim Parker commented that Nabi Yaqub lost his eyesight through the grief of losing his son Yusuf, and 100%, exactly. That is how intense grief can be. Prophet ﷺ, he grieved for an extremely long period of time after his wife passed away and after his son passed away. So, that is something also that, his uncle passed away. So that is something also that you have to take into consideration, that it is not a sign of weak iman. Okay. Someone asked something about bipolar and is there a cure? Unfortunately, there isn't a cure, but there are ways to help manage it. That is, one of those things where medication is quite important because it's a massive imbalance of the chemicals. But I don't want us to get off topic here, because we want to focus on the stigma of mental health within our Muslim community. So, all right. Okay. Shukran for all of those comments. They're very helpful. Okay, so someone says here, according to psychologists, persons go through 7 stages of grief. Okay, so there is a concept called the 7 stages of grief. I think what's misunderstood about those 7 stages of grief is that it's not 7 stages as if you just follow it step by step and go through each stage, and then when you get to the end, you're okay. Those stages, you go from
it repeats
grief,
throughout your life,
anger to yes,
because you will experience different things related to that grief years later, and you think you've worked through it, but something new will come up for you. And it's not about sorting everything out in your life and being able to deal with everything with a smile on your face and be happy all the time. The whole point about it is to understand that there's bad stuff gonna happen, bad stuff did happen, bad stuff will happen, but your mind is a strong asset, and you need to have all of the tools available for you to be able to manage that, to be able to further improve the integrity of that asset. And what do you need to do? You need to invest in your therapy, your psychologist, your reflection, your time to think about these things and not get caught up in the superficial world. And part of that is then to help you in that moment when these things happen and you have that requirement for grit to get you through. Then you lean into your surahs, you lean into your du'as that you've been making all the time, and you lean into that asset that you've now grown to a certain level that's going to get you through this bad thing that's happening. And maybe not with a smile on your face, but with so much awareness and so much like empowerment to be able to get you through it, so that you're not leaning too much if that was maybe you in the past, and then you can move forward. And that's just the thing, because people, I think we glorify people who are at the top a lot. That's just the way of the world. We put people on a pedestal. We want to see things perfect all the time. And I will talk about something that came out very recently on Netflix, a documentary, the David Beckham documentary. And what I found with the response of males specifically to that documentary is that they didn't like it because this was a different side to David Beckham that they've seen. Because remember now, you're used to seeing the strong person, this famous person, this really wealthy person, this person that married like one of the most beautiful women ever. You don't want to see this person weak. You don't want to see this person vulnerable because this is now one of your idols and that the whole concept of the documentary and him being vulnerable, him showing that side of himself was like, it's like a wake-up call. It's like to tell you, stop putting people on a pedestal and stop also in yourself trying to chase that life that is an ideal or chase the fact that you're just going to be happy the whole time, because that's not it's not sustainable. It doesn't exist. And your true reality is to actually just invest in that mindset that's going to get you through the dark days.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So there isn't exactly what Fazila says. Like there isn't a beginning, middle, and end. It varies, and it'll come back and hit you, and it will go away. And yeah, it's just what you're going through on a day-to-day basis, and how we see things and how we experience things is very different. I just want to someone asked something that I wanted to comment on. Okay, yes. So what steps or actions can be taken? I want to answer this because we've only got about 6 minutes left. And I think that that's a very important, that was obviously one of the things, one of the themes that we were supposed to cover. So the one thing that I said was about breaking the cycle, about seeking help for yourself, supporting others within your community who you see are struggling. So if you know, someone is experiencing, whether it's abuse, specifically within your own family, if you know that there's things that are happening that are not okay, whether it's abuse, whatever, a lot of people don't want to put their nose in a person's business. They'll talk about it, in other circumstances, in social situations, they'll talk about it, but then they won't actually do anything to help the person who's going through what they're going through. And I think that really needs to change. If you see something, do something. I think that is, something really important. If something doesn't feel right, ask the person. They may cover it up, they may say no, but what you're doing by asking is that you're telling the person, I see you. And you're planting a seed of, if you need help, please let me know. I'm here for you. Even if they say to you, no, everything's fine, don't worry about it. And then you just say to them, well, listen, if ever there's anything, you need help with anything, if you're worried about anything, please know that you can come talk to me about it, and I will help you as best as I can. It is unbelievable how powerful just that can be. Just letting a person know that there are people who see them and who are willing to help them. That's one of the huge ways that you can start breaking down the stigma within our societies. So whether it's seeking help for yourself, just your awareness of what's going on around you. If you are going through things yourself where you are being treated differently because of like your mental health and your struggles that you're going through, then you need to seek help for yourself, which is going to help strengthen whatever it is, help you learn how to give you the tools that you need to deal with, whether it's stigma or whether it's people who are, someone mentioned someone making jokes at a person who is clearly depressed and attempted suicide, so, giving them that support, letting them know that you understand and they're not alone through all of it, that's really important. But if they can be in therapy themselves and gain the tools where they can learn how to build boundaries, create boundaries for themselves, how to manage in those situations, get coping mechanisms to deal with those situations, it'll make a huge difference for them. Fazila, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to mention with regards to that question around how do we break the stigma within our communities, or if you feel I touched on all of it.
I think you have, especially with the support group and really just support statements from people and doing what we're doing and having those conversations. And not also
100%
isolating the fact that you're attending a webinar and then tomorrow someone goes through something and then you completely dismiss it and have the same attitudes towards it that you would before. So try to like let it all interlink and integrate so that you are mindful of when things are happening, when you're observing people's behaviors, because just observing a person, you can tell already whether they're okay or not. And it's about getting outside of yourself when you are around other people to be able to have that level of observation, to know that someone else is not okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thanks, Samaya.
Absolutely. I mean, Adila commented, we need to be our biggest supporter. And I think that is so powerful. Exactly. We need to find our strength. We need to know that we are allowed to express how we feel, that we're allowed to not be okay, that it's okay to not be okay, and we need to be the change that we seek in the world. I'm stealing all of these things from these amazing people, but but that is the thing, that if we want things to change, we have to proactively make this change happen. And having conversations like this, I mean, this is something Fazila and I are trying to do, in just having more of these kind of conversations, and promoting like her type of book, and making people just be more aware that they're not alone in what they're going through. There's so many people who are going through similar situations.
I like Maimuna's statement at the bottom about she really feels that our ulama can and should do more to highlight mental health issues in our community. I fully agree. There's so many times that I've said, where's the space that all of our men meet on a regular basis and very frequently? Every Friday in the mosque. A really good topic for a khutbah would be this exact topic. Like, start the conversations there, that you already have the platform. There's already a space where it's going to reach the males within our community, which is so key. I fully agree.
Yeah. Najiba asked if we have a group that you can join. Not yet, but we're working on it. So he said, yeah, so inshallah, we will get there. This is a very new process for us that we are slowly working on, but inshallah we will get there, and that is the plan. We want to start groups like this where we can have these conversations, and for it to be a safe place where people feel supported and able to talk about it, and these are not therapy groups, these are support groups where for people to recognize that they're not alone. And also, just touching on the point about the ulama, I think one of the things, if you guys go onto YouTube, there are so many muftis now who are actually talking very openly about mental health and the importance of mental health, and also, not seeing mental health issues as un-Islamic. So that is also very, so there are people out there. There are our scholars who are trying to break these cycles. So definitely, go onto YouTube and see what's out there. Someone asked about a high school learner who seems to be struggling with mental illness.
Yeah, Sally Parker asked about that.
Yeah, and sure. There's a few, that's like a long answer. So I'll ask Muslim Connected, I'll ask Masood to just give you guys my email address. I don't mind that, and we can put that out there. If you have questions like that, I'm happy to respond to them. but yeah, it's very complicated. Let's just put it that way. But they are avenues to get help. I'll give you those responses. I'm actually just gonna put my email on here quickly, and you guys can email me with any of the questions that I did not answer, and I'll do my best to answer them. Fazila, do you want to put anything, the details of where they can get your book on here?
Yeah, so it is available on Amazon, but all the details are on my website. I've put the web address there in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Maya.
Okay, I see Zakira just put down the Kruger ACE Adolescent Center, that you can get help there. I mean, there's also Red Cross that has, I mean, they have long waiting lists and stuff. I mean, there's actually quite a few. So I'm happy to give those details and of the different organizations, because with these public facilities, the waiting list, it can be quite long. So and yeah, so I think the Kruger one is for adolescents. So it's, oh yeah, Zakir said 13 to 18 years. And then Red Cross, I think it's for much younger, all the way through. Yeah, okay. Shukran everyone for attending and for your patience. I know we went over a little bit, but we did start a little bit late because of all the technical complications. But shukran everyone for your attendance and for your interest and your comments. Shukran Fazila for being a part of this conversation with me and for allowing us to use your amazing book. We'll just give it a little look again there.
Why don't you just become a PR person? Thanks, Sumaya.
You have one of those. I don't think she'll be very happy. Yeah. Okay. Shukran everyone, and I look forward to seeing you at our next conversation, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.